Most people think they fail because they're not talented enough, or disciplined enough, or because other people had easier lives, better connections, better timing. That story is comfortable, but it's wrong. The simpler truth is this: most people stop long before their work has any real chance to turn into visible results. They quit during the slow years, the quiet years, the years where it feels like nothing is moving. Then they rewrite the story and call it "wasn't meant to be."
That's the real barrier, not talent, not discipline, not opportunity. The real barrier is this: your belief collapses the moment progress stops being obvious. You can be intelligent, consistent, and hardworking and still never get anywhere if your motivation depends on seeing constant improvement. If you only trust the process when the results are visible, you will abandon every serious goal you start. Because every meaningful goal has long stretches where nothing appears to be happening. This is where delusional self-belief matters. Not the delusion where you pretend you're gifted, the delusion where you decide the work will eventually pay off, even when nothing in your life is confirming that. When your friends think you're wasting your time, when your family is confused about what you're doing, when your bank account looks the same, and you keep going anyway. From the outside, that kind of belief looks irrational, but it's usually the only reason someone survives long enough to reach the point where progress finally becomes visible. Look at any goal that actually changes a life. Building a career from zero, switching fields, becoming world-class at a skill, building a company. Almost all of them have the same pattern. Years where the graph looks flat. You're improving internally, but externally nothing looks different. You're studying, practicing, failing, adjusting. The base layer of competence is being built and nobody can see it. People who rely on external proof give up during that phase. They assume the lack of visible progress means they're not cut out for it. People who rely on internal belief keep going. They assume the lack of visible progress is just how it works. That gap is where the separation happens. Same environment, same economy, same world, different tolerance for working with no proof. People who succeed usually aren't working harder in any given week. They're just working for more years without needing anyone to clap for them. That is the actual psychological difference. Their willingness to stay in the dark phase is higher than everyone else's. Take Roger Bannister. For decades, runners believed the 4-minute mile was beyond human capability. Doctors said it was unsafe. Coaches repeated that belief to new athletes. Trainings, races, attempts all hit the same wall. The entire system was built on the assumption that 4 minutes was the limit. Bannister read the same data and heard the same opinions. He had no special evidence that it was possible. He just refused to treat the existing failures as the final word. He trained as if the barrier was an illusion. On the day he broke the record, nothing dramatic happened besides the clock. He didn't suddenly transform as a human being. He simply ignored a line everyone else accepted. Within weeks, other runners broke the same mark. The track didn't change. The air didn't change. Their beliefs changed. Bannister's irrational conviction rewired what was considered realistic. That is what delusional persistence looks like in practice. It keeps you moving through the flat, boring, unrewarding stretches where logic tells you to slow down or stop. Now look at Arnold Schwarzenegger. Today, people treat his life like a cartoon success story, but if you rewind to the start, his plan made no sense. Small town in Austria. Parents who thought bodybuilding was pointless. No industry. No money in the sport, no guarantee it could lead anywhere. Then he starts talking about moving to America and becoming a movie star, with a heavy accent and a physique no one in Hollywood knew what to do with. From a realistic perspective, everything was against him. Reasonable people would have scaled down their vision. Arnold didn't. He lived as if the outcome was non-negotiable. He trained, competed, learned English, saved money, and moved toward a version of his future that existed only in his head. For years, that belief was completely unsupported by evidence. Nothing about that is rational in the short term. In the long term, It was the only move that made his life possible. People praise his work ethic now because they know how the story ends. But if you looked at him in his early 20s, his confidence had no obvious justification. He wasn't following the data. He was acting from a level of internal certainty that most people would call delusional. Then there's Sylvester Stallone, which is probably the cleanest example of this mindset in action. Before Rocky, Stallone spent years getting rejected for roles. He kept hearing the same feedback. Wrong look, wrong sound, not leading man material. He was broke. He lived in a tiny apartment. He struggled to pay for food. He was so desperate at one point that he sold his dog outside a liquor store because he couldn't afford to feed it. That wasn't a dramatic story for motivation posters. That was his actual life. No money, no career, no real proof that any of this would work out. Then he watched the Ali versus Wepner fight, went home, and wrote the first draft of Rocky in a few days. Studios liked the script but didn't want him in the lead role. They offered him money for the script on the condition that a more famous actor would play Rocky. He said no. From any rational angle, his refusal was a bad decision. No status, no leverage, no savings, nothing to suggest he could demand conditions, but his belief wasn't built on rational probability in the short term. He had decided he would play that character, and every offer that didn't match that decision was irrelevant. Eventually, one studio agreed to his terms at a lower budget. Rocky was made. It exploded. It won awards. It turned him into a star. And with his first real money, he went back to that same liquor store and waited outside it for days until he found the man who had his dog. The guy didn't want to sell him back. Stallone kept increasing the price until he did. The man also asked for a role in the movie. That's why the dog you see in Rocky is his real dog. People like the success outcome. They skip over the reality underneath it. Being so broke, you sell your dog, and so stubborn, you still turn down money with no plan B. That's not some vague idea of believing in yourself. That is a level of conviction that looks stupid until it works. In business, Sarah Blakely is a similar story in a different domain. No fashion background, no manufacturing experience, no investors. She was selling fax machines door to door and altered her own tights because she didn't like how they looked under her clothes. She felt the result was better. That was her entire starting point. Everyone she pitched early on had reasons to say no. Manufacturers dismissed her. Industry people didn't see the point. She didn't respond by deciding they were right. She responded by staying in the problem. She learned the patent system herself because she couldn't afford a lawyer. She kept calling factories until one finally listened. She pushed to get her product into stores through direct persistence, not a perfect plan. For years, there was no sign this would become anything. No sales numbers, no investors, no external validation. Just a person who wouldn't drop an idea that nobody else believed in. Today, the company is worth billions. People now call the story inspiring. During the actual timeline, it just looked like stubbornness. None of these stories are magic. They are examples of the one thing most people refuse to do: stay in the game long enough for effort to matter. Now let's address the word that everyone hides behind: luck. Whenever someone finally breaks through in a big way, you hear the same sentence: they got lucky. It's an easy explanation. It protects people from having to look at their own quitting patterns. If success is mostly luck, then nothing is your fault. What they got lucky usually ignores is time spent in the environment. The person who suddenly got discovered had been around for years when nothing happened. They were working, meeting people, improving their craft, getting rejected, adjusting. They were present when nothing was rewarding them. If Stallone had quit acting after 5 years, Rocky never shows up on a screen. If Schwarzenegger had accepted that he should stay in Austria with a safe job, his later life disappears. If Blakely had given up after the first few manufacturers told her no, Spanx would not exist. Yes, timing plays a role. Being in the right room with the right person at the right moment matters. But timing only matters if you are still in the room. Most people are not. They left years earlier. That's why delusional belief works in practice. It keeps you in the room when everyone else has walked out. People who achieve big things don't have perfect timing. They simply refuse to leave the environment where timing can eventually hit them. They eat the years of boredom, rejection, and flat results without walking away. Most people never reach that stage. They cycle through different goals, chase new ideas, and never stay anywhere long enough for probability to shift in their favor. This is the actual separation. Not raw talent, not IQ, not background, endurance in the silent years. Psychologically, a few core things are happening. First, self-efficacy. This is the belief that your actions can produce change over time. People with high self-efficacy don't need proof of success to continue. They interpret setbacks as part of the process instead of as final verdicts. Second, identity. Once a goal becomes part of who you are, quitting stops being a neutral decision. If you see yourself as a writer, you write. If you see yourself as an athlete, you train. Walking away feels like deleting a piece of yourself. That pressure keeps you in motion when external results don't. Third, expectation loops. If you expect that improvement is possible, you keep practicing, studying, and experimenting. Those behaviors lead to actual improvement. The improvement reinforces your belief. Over time, that loop creates competence that looks like talent from the outside. Fourth, long delay feedback. Serious skills do not give you fast feedback. You can work for months or years before anything big happens. People who can't handle delay misread silence as failure. People who understand delay treat silence as part of the normal timeline. Fifth, emotional tolerance. Most people cannot tolerate feeling uncertain for long. They want signs. They want constant encouragement. High-level work doesn't give you that. Delusional belief covers that gap. It gives you enough internal certainty to keep going while the outside world is still neutral. There are limits. Delusional belief becomes harmful when it replaces effort. If someone is doing nothing, learning nothing, and ignoring every piece of feedback while saying, "I know it'll work out," that's not self-belief. That's avoidance. Useful delusion is different. It sits on top of disciplined work, not instead of it. You are improving your competence, building real skills, and still believing in outcomes you can't prove yet. So how do you use this in a way that helps you instead of blinding you? First, stop demanding fast feedback. If you need visible progress every month, you have already decided to fail at most long-term goals. Give yourself a window of years, not weeks. Second, keep building skill even when nobody is paying attention. Skill is what makes your belief reasonable later. Without skill, your belief never turns into anything. Third, stop treating other people's timelines as benchmarks. You don't see how long they were invisible. You only see them after they're visible. Fourth, stop resetting your life every time the excitement wears off. The boring phase is not a sign you picked the wrong thing. It's a sign you moved past the honeymoon period. Most people waste entire decades jumping from one fresh start to another and never hit depth in anything. Fifth, track what you can control. Hours practiced, reps done, projects finished, contacted people, sent pitches. That's your reality. Results arrive on their own schedule. Here's the simple math. If you keep improving at something for 10 straight years, your skill level will be nowhere near someone who dabbles for 6 months and quits. If you stay in an industry for 10 years, you will know more people, understand it more deeply, and see more opportunities than someone who bounces out after year 2. If you keep showing up during the invisible phase, the odds that something finally clicks rise sharply.
Most people never experience that compounding effect because they never stay long enough. They treat the flat years as failure instead of as the price of admission.
That's why logical belief isn't enough. Logical belief needs metrics. It needs short-term proof. When those vanish, so does the belief. Delusional belief survives that gap. It holds everything in place until the numbers finally move. You can spend your life waiting for evidence before you commit, which means you'll only ever commit to things that are already low risk and short term, Or you can accept that anything worth doing will require belief long before evidence shows up. Years of work before recognition. A long period where you look wrong before you look right. That is the real power of delusional self-belief. It's not about fantasy. It's about staying when most people leave. It's about continuing when logic says to cut your losses. It's about trusting that effort is stacking up even when it's not obvious yet. And it's understanding that the only way to reach the moment where everything finally moves is to still be there when that moment arrives.